All right. So, hello everyone. For anyone who doesn't know me yet, my name is Seth Lewis. I have been a capstone student under the lovely Jennifer Robbins for the past 14 weeks. And I'm going to talk to you today about the integration of sports into occupational therapy programming, along with a little more information about my overall capstone project. So just to talk about the motivation for my capstone, I've been a part of a very sports-driven family my entire life. I joined my first competitive sports team when I was 3 years old and ended up playing five different sports throughout high school. Throughout this time, I always found ways to tie sports and service together. For instance, during my bar mitzvah project in middle school, I partnered with my local lacrosse organization to raise money for a freshwater well in Africa. During middle school and high school, I was very involved in the top soccer program, which I know Skills partners with. For anyone who doesn't know, that program uses sports such as soccer or basketball to be able to help children with disabilities develop life skills and social skills. During my OT schooling, I became very involved in adaptive sports and focusing more on children with physical disabilities. I became a volunteer wheelchair basketball coach both in St. Louis and in Richmond during my first Fieldwork 2 opportunity. And I used my Fieldwork 1 opportunities to learn more about the tie between sports and skills that you would see in a clinic. Volunteering at a camp for sports camp for children with cerebral palsy, and helping set up a weekend camp for toddlers with disabilities to trial different adaptive sports. So, how this capstone looked. I had four different objectives that all tied together with the ultimate goal of developing, piloting, and evaluating a feasible summer program with sports being the primary therapeutic tool. For the first objective, this was to demonstrate the ability to develop a variety of sustainable programs with ranging therapeutic tools. So at least one of these would be that sports therapy program, but the other curriculum that would be made would be based on the needs of the Skills on the Hill Clinic and what the community needed as well. So the idea was to get as much practice as possible with the practicing marketing a program and developing a curriculum that could be used on a step-by-step basis. The second objective was to demonstrate the ability to develop, pilot, and evaluate feasible and sustainable programming with sports as the primary therapeutic tool. So this was trialing out the sports therapy program that I created, and this took place 2 weeks ago at the Virginia Clinic. Objective three was to develop entry-level proficiency in pediatric clinic and school system skills. So the idea was that when I did finally do that sports implementation, that it would be as effective as possible. In order to achieve this, on Tuesdays, I went into the DC clinic and I helped treat alongside Jen, and I shadowed Kristen I in the afternoons. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would also go to the school system with Kira at Benning Middle and Elementary School in order to learn more about implementation of pediatrics in the school system. This also looked like me helping assist and lead other summer programs that were not just my own sports program. Finally, objective four was to increase knowledge and understanding of the business considerations of the clinic. This is where I was super lucky to have Jen be my mentor. I was able to shadow her on a daily basis and attend many of her administrative meetings. I also helped her with the marketing of programs and working on making sure that we had the right children in our programs through our screenings. So I ended up interviewing over 30 different families to make sure that their children were good fits for not just my program, but all of our summer programming. And so I'm very thankful to have that experience as well. So just to talk about a little bit of current research when it comes to sports and different skills that you might treat at an outpatient clinic. Many studies displayed a positive impact between the two. In terms of two qualitative studies with adaptive athletes, they found that sports provided a sense of identity, confidence, and community. There were two different studies that I found that tied sports with the autistic community. So they found that one group that performed a tennis game would improve fine and gross motor skills over the course of 6 weeks. The other found that a running club for children with autism helped reduce self-stimulating behaviors. Academic improvements were also seen between both children with disabilities and without disabilities. So one study had children running for intensively for 10 minutes during their recess period and seeing if it improved their academics afterwards, and there was a statistically significant improvement. Finally, another study found that inclusive sports programs benefited both those with and without disabilities. And this was super important to see when it comes to not only our entire clinic, when we might see a variety of diagnoses, but also our summer programming, where some of our children might have disabilities, but others will not. So I really wanted to make sure that everyone was getting an even amount of benefit from these programs. There are also a couple of aspects to consider that came up during this research. The first was advocacy, with the idea that there was a lot of limited space and materials for adaptive programs, particularly with wheelchair basketball, wheelchair rugby, where you might need a lot greater space, and also providing these sports wheelchairs for the participants. The pace of play was also something to consider. One study for children who were playing basketball who had intellectual disabilities found that they tended to succeed better with a slower pace of play and a little bit of a less structured game. I also performed key informant interviews as part of my preparation for the capstone. The first was with local educators in the DC community. They stated that the community was looking to focus on long-term sustainability and that there would be greater buy-in if a program related to a common childhood activity. So they were kind of stressing that a lot of families wanted to see their children participating in a typical activity that the rest of the community and peers would do, such as sports. They also mentioned that there was a limited amount of sports therapy programs in the area due to these space limitations, and that many families had to go out into greater areas in Virginia or Maryland in order to achieve these. I also talked with adaptive sports experts, coaches, and players. This included one player who was in his 20s now, who had been an adaptive athlete his entire life, and then two players who were between the ages of 8 and 10 and currently athletes. They again stressed how much sports provided a sense of normalcy, personal control, measurable improvement, and really the community aspect of it. The one individual in his 20s mentioned that he was able to create both professional and networking opportunities across the globe through this adaptive sports that he was a part of. And the idea that any individual might find that tie with sports. And so we want to provide that to our disabled friends as well. And then finally, they recommended in terms of the actual implementation that there would be creative and fun drills, as well as shifting between individual activities that could really focus on skill development and group activities where you could really focus on that teamwork and social aspect that sports provides. So with this in mind, I had three different types of sports programs that I thought potentially could be creative for the Skills on the Hill Clinic. The first was an exercise-focused program to support sensory regulation. So this was structured similar to the Exershine Kids concepts that Kristen talked about up to us in a staff meeting a month ago. And the idea was to additionally integrate fine and gross motor development through sports, but really focusing on that high-intensity exercise to support sensory systems. The second was a sports-focused social skill development group. So this would be similar to our Social Explorers group, really focusing on that community and teamwork aspect of sports to help build up social aspects. I wanted to introduce social and emotional strategies through the common activity of sports and also use some sports terminology to try to make these social concepts a little easier to grasp for our participants. Finally, this program could kind of serve as a transition to typical OT services for any families who really want to see what OT was about. Finally, there's an idea for an adaptive sports exploration program. So this would not only be developing fine and gross motor skills through sports, but also serving as an opportunity for different disabled peers in our community to learn new occupations and trial different adaptive sports, such as wheelchair basketball or wheelchair rugby. This would also serve as a potential opportunity for a co-treatment with physical therapists. So once I arrived at the Skills on the Hill Clinic, I performed a small needs assessment in order to determine what programs should be created, both for the sports program and also to fill that objective one with the variety of different programs. So I started with a discussion with our clinical director, Jen Robbins, and she expressed interest in the exercise-focused program as well as the social skills sports program. She additionally told me that there was a request and need from the community for executive functioning programming, which I had a lot of experience with in the past, as well as functional community management programs. I then looked at the population as well as the logistics of our space and materials. And I determined, just due to a lack of space, time, and overall resources, that it would be a little too challenging for us to create the adaptive sports program for this summer implementation. Finally, we did some preliminary marketing for the program ideas, interviewed caregivers, and got an overall response from the community. They found that there was a lack of interest overall in our exercise-focused sensory program, but there was interest in the sports team social program and community exploration program, along with some mixed interest in executive functioning programming that may happen in the fall or the winter. So with this in mind, I had three core types of programs that were created. The social sports stars focused on that social and emotional regulation using sports as a therapeutic tool. And we will get into that program in the remainder of our presentation. The second was our organization station. This was a metacognitive based executive functioning program. So the first version of the organization station was developing executive functioning skills through brain games and week-long STEM projects. And this would take place over the course of 1 week and through that 9 to 12 core block. The second version of this program was to develop key executive functioning skills, again through brain games and an interactive workbook. But this time, both children and caregivers would participate in order to help improve carryover into the home and the community. And this would take place once per week over the course of 6 to 8 weeks. Finally, the last program that was created was the Ready, Set, Go program, which was our functional community management program. The first version was to develop life skills through a variety of community-based activities. This may have included learning how to budget and then going into and shopping at a grocery store, or learning how to order a coffee at a coffee shop and then executing that order. The second version of this program was to develop functional skills for independence through, again, these community-based activities, but they would ultimately accumulate into a final group party that was planned by our participants. And this first version of the program was run during the first week of our summer with great success. So that was super exciting to see. In terms of the social sports stars, there were 4 key aspects to this. There was going to be a sport of the day and a social emotional theme of the day. Each of these social emotional themes had a core social lesson from an evidence-based program such as social thinking. Finally, again, like I said before, I really wanted to have a correlation between sports terminology and the social skills, both through combined activities and during our core social lesson. So this is how each day looked during our program implementation. We would start with a welcome, and this would have an icebreaker that didn't necessarily have to be sports themed. Then we would have a sports themed obstacle course of the day in order to get our participants excited for that sport and also have some opportunities for the integration of fine motor skills, gross motor skills, core strength, balance, and even some executive functioning. And we would always run these different obstacle courses. And at the end, we would have our participants race our different therapists just for a little bit of fun. We would then have a social lesson of the day, which would usually be paired with a tabletop activity or craft. After this, we would have our social sports activity of the day. So this was our combined activity that I will get into on the next slide. Following snack, we would play a social game, and then we would wrap up with an animal sports game. So this was a Libby creation. I got to thank her for that. So this was where we would play our sport of the day in a small little game, and any movements during that sport would have to be through an animal walk that was decided by a therapist or the children in order to work on that social aspect from playing the game, but also, again, integrate that fine motor and gross motor buildup. Finally, we'd wrap up usually with our fan favorite musical swings. So for the program implementation that took place 2 weeks ago, the frequency was over the course of 1 week with that core 3-hour block from 9 to noon. Our participants were 3 boys aged 8 and 9 with a variety of diagnoses, including autism, ADHD, and anxiety. In terms of staffing, outside of myself, we had at least 1 trained therapist and then 2 therapy assistants that were either undergraduates or our fieldwork students. And then for the sports and the social themes that we focused on. So for our first day, we had soccer and emotional regulation strategies. And so for our combined activity, we did an emotional regulation penalty shootout. So for this, we taught a variety of strategies to our kiddos, including such as hot chocolate breath, and they would have to perform 1 strategy before taking a penalty kick in order to focus like they were focusing like a soccer player would. Our second day was basketball and size of the problem. So for this combined activity, we set up a basketball hoop and we had 3 different lengths of shots. The short shot was supposed to simulate a small problem, the medium shot was a medium problem, and the far shot was a big problem. We would give different scenarios to our participants and they would take the shot according to the size of the problem that they thought was occurring. For football and communication, we had 2 different combined sports activities. The first was for nonverbal communication, which was silent speedball. So for this game, all of our participants could not talk and they had to pass the ball within 3 seconds. And we focused on ways to communicate without using our words. So putting our hands up to show that we were ready to catch, making eye contact before throwing the ball, and to let them know that you were ready to catch the ball as well. In terms of our verbal communication, we played a round of football route telephone. So we taught three different football routes to our participants and played a game of telephone to send the route down to the end of the line. So this way we could practice working on clear and concise communication. Our fourth day was baseball and flexible thinking, with rock brain being the social concept that we talked about. And then our combined activity was a little bit of a baseball lineup order in order to work on flexibility. So we had eight different variations on the lineup for our participants to hit the ball and run around the bases. And they were chosen on very random ways, such as alphabetical order, who could throw a paper airplane the farthest. And so our friends had to work on flexible thinking and realizing that it didn't matter if they were in first for the lineup. Finally, on our last day, we had volleyball and sportsmanship. So for this combined activity, our campers, along with some therapist help, created a list of 15 different sportsmanship compliment phrases that they could say, whether they were doing great during the activity or if they were having a little bit of trouble. We played a few rounds of balloon volleyball, and after each point, both sides had to give a sportsmanship compliment to the other side. So, in order to determine the efficacy of this pilot program, there were three different ways that we tackled this. The first was with a child response survey. So, this survey looked at how much fun our campers had. They ranked the order of their favorite sports activities. We asked how much the sports team improved the camp, what social lessons they took away from the camp, and then finally, anything that they would change. So, I am happy to report that there was overall a very large positive response. Each of our kiddos said that they liked the program a lot, which was the highest level that they could say. And two stated that the sports team greatly improved their experience. And the third said that he loved the sports team, but he thinks he would have had fun no matter what. In terms of social takeaways, two labeled flexible thinking as their big takeaways. And so for one of our friends during our flexible thinking day, he honestly had a lot of trouble with the concept. And then on the next day, he did show a little more flexible thinking along with this week as we've seen him back in camp. And so that was super exciting to see. The third one labeled his hot chocolate breath as the emotional strategy for his social takeaway. In terms of the favorite activities over the course of the week, obstacle course and animal pose were chosen by all three kids, and one decided that the basketball day in general was his favorite. In terms of our favorite sports, basketball, soccer, and baseball were clear fan favorites, and volleyball was a very clear last place, which is a-okay. And then in terms of recommended changes, they recommended adding tennis and lacrosse, and especially being in the DMV, lacrosse definitely makes sense for a sport that could potentially be added, as that is a very popular sport around here, and they've probably seen a lot of their friends playing it as well. And one asked for more participants. A Qualtrics survey was sent home to parents in order to also get some response from them, and there was again positive response to the program. They confirmed that their child greatly enjoyed the program, and there was at least moderate improvement in social emotional skills, which I was super excited to hear, even over a weekend after a 1 week program, that they were reporting some improvement in social skills. The parents themselves reported that they were extremely satisfied. The most mentioned activities by their children were the obstacle courses and the musical swings. And then in terms of sustainability, they reported that they would sign up for a similar program again, and that they would also recommend a similar program to other families. Finally, I had discussions with the therapists and the assistants to receive their feedback on the program. There is strong support for the program across all six therapists and assistants that helped along the way. Some highlighted strengths included the blending of sports concepts and social emotional strategies, consistent opportunities for motor integration, integration of a preferred activity for many of our male clients, and baseball was singled out as the favorite day from our therapy assistants. In terms of recommended improvements, they recommended incorporating a larger variety of sports, mixing up the teams. So often during our games, we would have it be our campers versus our therapists. And we did mix it up on the last day. I think that was very helpful for skill building and just getting some flexibility. They recommended co-ed participants, a larger group size, and then recall of different social emotional challenges from previous sessions. So for instance, our friend that was having a little bit of trouble with flexible thinking, doubling down on that concept for the next day. So for my recommendations for future implementation of this program, I would definitely recommend keeping the daily themes. I think the beauty of this program is that it is very flexible based on whatever group you have. The sports and the social skills can be very interchangeable, and you could even ask your participants at the beginning of the week what sports they were interested in to implement these for the rest of the week. I would say it could be beneficial to spend multiple days on a specific social theme, such as with our friend with flexible thinking, having 2 different days. But I would try to change the sport each day just so that it feels very novel and fresh. I would additionally continue integrating tabletop social lessons, games, and crafts. It really helped break up the physically straining sports activities, and it also provided some relief and novelty to all the games that would go on later in our sessions. Some of our friends can sign up for a sports-based program, and they can play baseball for 3 hours, no problem. But other ones kind of need those breaks to help keep it fresh and not get bored with that specific sport for the day. In terms of group characteristics, I think the ideal group size would be about 3 to 8 participants. The beauty of sports games is that they require multiple participants, and everyone is very active in these games at the same time. So it does provide opportunity for a little bit of a larger group because all of our friends can be active and social at the same time. However, I would still recommend no more than a 3 to 1 camper to therapist ratio. I would also say that the ideal age would be 7 to 12 years old. There is a certain level of cognition that is not only needed for social concepts to really stick, but also to be able to work in the structure of all of these sports games. We trialed some of these sports activities in our early learners group with our 3 to 5 year old range, and they had a blast playing the games. But in terms of the actual social lesson and their to keep maintaining the structure of the game, this was a little less successful. Finally, I recommend to get involved and have fun. As I said, we had all these sports games that required a lot of bodies, so our therapists and assistants really were able to naturally integrate themselves into all of these games, and it really helped add to the overall team concept that we were going for with that social lesson. It felt less like we were imposing these games and drills into our participants, and more like we were all working together as a team to have fun and learn some of our social lessons. And this really helped our participants feel comfortable and get out of their shells. I'll be honest with you, a lot of them were ganging up on me and absolutely roasting me the entire session. And it was super fun to see them really have them get out of their shell and get really social about that as well, like you might see on any sports team. So, in conclusion, there was preliminary evidence of the success of sports as a therapeutic tool in the pediatric setting. So, this can be both for the Social Sports Stars program, but also using any of the activities that you might find in the curriculum workbook that is on SharePoint right now in your therapy sessions. There was support from participants, caregivers, and the providing therapists. This program was incredibly easy to run and can be implemented in a pinch. All of the materials were something that are already found in a traditional pediatric clinic. And so even if we don't market the social sports stars, it would be nice to market it in terms of getting people interested in sports. But if you have a social skills program and you see that your participants either need that movement that you get from sports or are all interested in sports, you could easily run this program right away and with no extra cost to the clinic. Sports provides an opportunity to address a wide variety of skills as seen in the research, but also as seen in the program that we piloted. Even though the social aspect was our goal, we were constantly integrating that fine motor and gross motor movement just by nature of how sports work. And then finally, I just think that sports returns us to our treatment to that core pillar of using occupations as a therapeutic means. Sports play such a large role in many of our children's lives as they're growing up. And I think that it's always great for us to figure out how we can integrate this fun childhood activity to help benefit their development. So big special thanks to Jen for taking me on as a student. I know that's not always the case, and so I super appreciate that. Thanks to Kira and Kristen for letting me shadow you, and to everyone who helped run this sports program, but also all of our summer programs that are lunch buddies. I greatly appreciate all of you all. So thank you so much. Right now, the curriculum is on SharePoint. I'm also going to be posting this on YouTube, and we're going to have that in the description as well. So this sports program will be available for anyone.
Awesome job. Thank you, Seth.
Thanks.
We have loved having